Goedemiddag allemaal. Ondertussen is iedereen binnengekomen. Welkom, fijn dat het gelukt is. We gaan nu echt van start. Het is allemaal voor ons ook nog eventjes wennen. Deze week zijn we gestart met de reeks van webinars. Maandag zijn we van start gegaan met een webinar voor docenten Duits. En vandaag gaan we verder met een webinar voor docenten Engels. En een hele bijzondere, want we gaan het boek Bloggers presenteren. En natuurlijk extra tips voor docenten Engels. Voor ons is Bloggers het boek waar het eerste keer dat we met Engels met een boek op de markt gaan. We zijn natuurlijk al bekend met onze methodes voor Duits, zoals Fantastisch, en voor Frans, zoals A+. En voor Spaans met Reporteros. Dus we gaan nu ook verder met bloggers. Wat nog eventjes belangrijk is om te noemen, maar ik zie dat dat automatisch al is gebeurd. Inderdaad, de microfoon en de camera staat uit. Dan ga ik u nu de spreker presenteren. Dat is Paul van der Made. Hij is docent Engels bij het Broekland College in Hoensbroek. En hij staat te popelen om jullie meer informatie te gaan vertellen. Paul, ik geef dan hierbij het woord aan jou.
Dankjewel, Suzanne. Ik hoop dat iedereen mij kan horen. Ik zal mijn scherm nu ook met iedereen even delen. Dan hebben we een mooi begin. Als iemand mijn scherm niet kan zien, als jullie dat dan even kunnen weergeven via de chat, dan zou dat heel mooi zijn, want die houd ik ook even bij. Ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you. My name is Paul, and I will be your web host for this afternoon. I've been asked to present this webinar in English, simply because we have a number of people from in and around Europe, and therefore it seemed the best to present the webinar in English. For those Dutch participants, if you have any questions or you've missed something in English or you'd rather ask some questions in Dutch, then please feel free and I will switch to Dutch to answer your question.
Paul, één dingetje. Kan je jouw video aanzetten? Zodat we je ook zien?
Ja, zo daar is die.
Ja,
heb je hem?
Zien we ook. Dankjewel.
Right, okay. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Wonderful to see you in such great numbers, particularly on a warm and beautiful day in the Netherlands like this, and of course also under very strange circumstances. Now, they are very strange. This for me is my first webinar. You could say I am a webinar virgin. So please be very, very patient with me. And but just to make sure I keep going and I keep to my timings and I'm clear on what I'm explaining, I've got a little bit of help today. And what I'd like to do now is introduce you to my wingman. This is my wingman. He should come up on screen. There we have him. That's little Paul. He's going to be keeping an eye on me today. And you'll meet him a little bit later during the presentation. You'll see where Paul came from, where little Paul came from, and why he is the epitome of creativity. Right, okay, let's move on. As I said, just to reiterate, just to repeat, when it comes to questions, the first thing we'd like you to do is if you have any questions for the very end, then put those into the Q&A. What I will do, and there is the Q&A screen for you, what I will do, of course, after each or every 2 or 3 slides, I will stop to answer any questions. And if you have any questions that are directly with regards to the slide, then please feel free to ask. And once again, if I don't get around to all of the questions in the chat during the presentation, then please pop those questions into the Q&A and Suzanne and I will answer your questions, or attempt to indeed, at the very end of this webinar. Right, okay. Now, let's start with the why, the how, and the what for this particular webinar. And when I'm standing in front of the class, in front of my pupils, in front of my students, I always start with the why, that then follows with the how, and that then comes to the what. And that will become clear again later on, because so many people start with the what we're going to do, but they don't start with the why we're going to do it. And if you want your students to buy in to task-based learning, then starting off with the why is always a great way to do so. So from our point of view, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Well, we're going to look at delivering task-based learning, what's involved with regards to task-based learning, what you need to look out for, what you need to anticipate. And under current times, how do you flip the task? In other words, how do you deliver that task online, and how do you get the kids to actually fulfill that task online as well? How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to look at how we can exploit and adapt and enhance the resources that we've got. From our point of view, the resources include bloggers, they include bloggers digital or digital, the online version of bloggers, but of course we also have all of the tools and the apps available at our fingertips. The world is our oyster with regards to that. And hopefully you'll have the enthusiasm to have a go for yourself. From my point of view, I've been delivering task-based lessons for quite a few years now, and I know that the kids, they find it great. There's real enthusiasm. They have ambition when they do so. And hopefully I can convince you to have a go as well. Right, so the first thing, as I said, we're going to look at is a number of elements that really describe what task-based learning is all about. And this particular statement, I thought I'd pop it up, comes from Prabhu. He's the godfather of task-based learning. He's the one who came up with the idea and the theory and the concept. Obviously, I can see you can read for yourself as well, but I wanted to pick out the key words that are in his statement. And those are opportunities. You need to engage in communication, achieve a goal, or complete a task. So with task-based learning, the key thing is we need to offer through that task or through that challenge, we want to offer our students the opportunity to engage in communication. Doesn't matter what format that communication takes. It could be, indeed, it could be writing, it could be speaking, it could be presenting, or indeed these days, it could be online. So we as a teacher need to provide them with all of those opportunities. And we put them into a small package, and that package you can call a task, you can call it a challenge, you can call it what you will. But the key thing is it needs to be achievable. If it's not achievable, then we lose that element of ambition, that element of motivation. So that's really what we're aiming for. And secondly, what we're also looking to do is to develop the students into language. Interlanguage, one of those wonderful words you look at and you think, well, okay, what does that mean? But in essence, what it means is that, okay, if we're a learner of a second language, then we will often tend to mix our first language with the second language that we're learning. And give you a great example. Whenever one of my students comes to me at the very beginning, they'll say to me, "Oi, mister." And of course, in an English sense, that's a bit cheeky. Not quite rude, but it's a little bit cheeky. And of course, what they're saying is, well, in Dutch we say "hallo meneer," of "meneer, mag ik wat vragen?" But in English they'll translate that to "mister." And that is where, of course, you've got the interlanguage, where they're taking on their first language and they're mixing it up with the second language. And what we're looking to do is to develop their language to such an extent that they actually start to become far more fluent with that second language that they're learning. So that's what the interlanguage is all about. Secondly, and this is a wonderful statement by Mr. Chomsky. If you've been to teach training college in the Netherlands, you would have become quite familiar with Chomsky. And he came up with what I think is a wonderful statement. It describes it beautifully, and that is all to do with how do we put creativity into a language. And what he's really saying is that we want our students to produce sentences that have never been spoken before, and understand sentences that have never been heard before. And that is really what we're after when it comes to our students. I think so. Anyway, we want to give them the safety, the freedom, and the opportunity to learn the language as it's spoken by natives. And that's what we're looking for. And to be creative with it. And task-based learning, of course, because you can use a task, the language is going to be a vehicle for your task. And yeah, it can go here, there, and everywhere into every subject matter. And therefore you will, by its sheer nature, hear words, sentences that have never been spoken before, and understand that you've never heard before. So those are the two things I really wanted to start off with. Right, let's move on, unless there are any particular questions at this point.
I got one question for you.
Shoot.
Just there is some question of who you are and what your nationality is. Can you maybe inform the people about that?
Yes, I can. I have dual nationality. I am British and I am Dutch. So therefore, quite happy to deliver the webinar either in Dutch or English. And I currently teach, as Suzanne has already explained, at a VMBO Opstroom college in a place called Hoensbroek, which is near Heerlen in the wonderful area of South Limburg. I hope that answers all the questions. Anything else?
No, that's it.
No? Okay. Hopefully that's answered it. Anyway, right, let's move on. Okay, the first thing I think that is important with regards to any kind of teaching, but particularly task-based learning, if you want it to be successful, is that your students are aware that making errors is part and parcel. Yeah, there is no problem in making errors. And what you really want to do is create that very safe environment where your students feel quite relaxed and quite happy to have a go. Even if they make a mistake, it's no problem. You've already explained to your students that, hey, we all make mistakes. We all learn from our mistakes. In fact, I normally say to my students, I actually want to see you make mistakes, because that means I can help you at a later point during the coaching part. I can help you look at those mistakes, see where you're going wrong, make you understand those mistakes, and then move on from those mistakes. And that's, I think, the key. I think very often we're far too much concerned with summative tests. We give our students a test. We see they make mistakes, we mark them down, we give them a particular mark which they're not very happy with, and we leave it at that. But particularly with task-based learning, you want to encourage them to feel free to, as it were, to make mistakes. Don't be afraid. Create that very much that safety environment, but you as the teacher are that safety net, so you will coach them through the errors that they make. So for some teachers that might sound a little bit upside down, a bit of a weird world, but errors is very much something that that you would encourage during that task-based learning, as we'll see later on, because it gives you that ability to coach your students through those errors, and they will come out so much better for it. Task-based learning also encourages authentic language. So now, what do we mean by authentic language? In other words, we don't put our students into situations that are not real. We want to give them tasks, we want to give them environment where they will learn language that they will use on an everyday basis. The focus is therefore on the meaning, and particularly the meaning of semantics versus pragmatics. Semantics, just to remind everybody, that of course is the dictionary explanation of a word, and pragmatics is really putting that word into context. So as I often explain to my students, you know, you can go into Google Translate, you can put in the Dutch word, it comes out with an English word. And yes, in terms of a dictionary, it might be a correct translation for that particular word from Dutch into English, but of course, it might not be the right word when it comes to context. And that is very much the thing that we want to focus on. A good example, of course, is that particularly my students in Healy, we have a lot of graffiti murals, and most of my students, including my colleagues, will call it gravity. One of my pet hates, because of course gravity in English means quite something else. It's zwaartekracht in Dutch, of course, and it keeps us with our feet firmly on the ground. And gravity, although it also means zwaartekracht, in English it can also, of course, means the gravity of a situation. De ernst van een situatie in Dutch. And therefore, there you want to focus on the meaning. In other words, yes, there are words you can use, but you want to start using them in the right context. And that you will very much do automatically through task-based learning, because you're obviously providing them tasks, varied amount of subject matter, and therefore in one subject, that particular word will fit in the context, but another subject, it will not. It has to be motivational. And of course, we're all looking to motivate our kids. That's these days easier said than we're done. And if we motivate our kids, it encourages ambition, it gets that intrinsic motivation going, but also that curiosity. And I'll give you a good example. At school, I'm one of the very few teachers that actually runs task-based learning during my lessons. And if I walk up and down the corridors and up and down the stairs, I'll get quite a few kids from other classes ask me, "Oh, sir, why do you sometimes move away, deviate from the book? Why do you do it differently?" There's a curiosity there. And sometimes if they have a free period, they'll knock on my door and they'll say, "Can we come and join your class? We know you do things differently." So, you know, through task-based learning, because it's different, because it's interest, you have so many different types of subjects that you can use as the vehicle to learn English, you're going to generate curiosity. And that's the key thing about task-based learning versus traditional learning and standing in front of a class. And last on this slide, but certainly not least, it's easy to combine those 21st century skills with the tasks that you set your kids. I'll come back to 21st century skills a little bit in more detail later on, but of course, what we're being asked to do, we're asked to prepare these kids for the workplace of the future. None of us have any idea what this future is going to look like, but of course, what we can do with task-based learning is we can touch upon so many areas that we're going to make our kids into that wonderful English expression, a jack of all trades. In other words, they're not an expert in one or perhaps two areas, but what we're doing is we're giving them through the tasks exposure to so many different ways of doing things, skill sets, be it offline or online. We are preparing them for that 21st century, whatever that will look like. In other words, they will adapt quite easily. So just to highlight those words, those phrases that are quite important on this slide, errors are part and parcel. Yeah, they should feel free to do so. Make it as real as possible, the authentic language into context. Make it motivational. Well, it's going to be motivational, I can promise you, by just doing task-based learning because it's different and they'll see it as fun and there's always something for everybody in it. And last but not least, you're preparing them for the world out there, whatever that world is going to look like. Right, any questions there at all?
At this moment, there are not any questions.
Okay, good. We'll move on. I just need to click onto my slide. There we are. Okay, so when you're putting a task-based lesson together, what are you really looking for? Well, you're looking to build it around three main elements. First of all, you've got your pre-task. In other words, what do I need to anticipate? What do I need to put in place so that those students have a fighting chance of completing that task, that challenge, whatever you want to call it. Once you've done that, you then go into the task cycle itself. That is actually doing the task, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. And then finally, of course, you have the post-task cycle. That element purely means that how are you going to evaluate? How are you going to look at how your student, together of course, how are you going to look at how you can improve, where the mistakes were, what should your student do, and in other words, to improve on that element that they fell down on, and how they can improve that from there onwards. I already mentioned anticipation exercises. That's the bit that you need to sit down with as a teacher. In other words, have I put everything in front of these kids that gives them the capability or the ability to actually complete that task? Remember, completing a task, giving them a fighting chance to do so, that is all very important. So anticipation exercises, we're going to delve into that a little bit later, but in other words, have I put all the right building blocks in place so that my kids, I can let them loose and put them into that task cycle and then finally come out of the post-task. Tasks are varied to cater for introvert and extrovert learners. Think about that when you're actually looking at tasks, what subject matters to put up for a task. I'll give you a good example. Like most of you, I've got a number of kids in my classes with rugzakjes. Some of them are quite autistic, and they would be very much introvert. They would rather shy away or not actually participate at all. And quite a number of them are very much into their pets, into their dogs, for example. So, in other words, to get them involved, I talk to my students, say, okay, what subject matters are, what makes you tick, what do you really enjoy? One of them said pets. So I built a whole task-based learning exercise around having a pet, how to look after a pet, how to, and so on and so forth. So that's the key thing. Built-in flexibility and freedom, allowing for differentiation and mixed abilities. Okay, now, the flexibility, that is key there. And I'll give you a good example of what I mean by that. In the beginning, I put together a task, and it was a task of putting together a small instruction booklet about graffiti murals. In fact, it was a tourist booklet, a leaflet on where to go, what to see, and so on and so forth. And of course, one of my instructions was, please type this out in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint. And one of the girls came to me, called Emma, and she said, oh, by the way, she said, sir, can I also draw that leaflet? And I thought to myself, okay, I've asked you to type it in Word or whatever it may be, but you've come and asked me, and can I draw it? I could have said no, of course, at that point, and that wouldn't have been very motivational, but I also had to sit back and think to myself, what am I actually testing here? Am I testing whether she can type it or whether she can write it? Or am I testing her language skills, the ability to write and for me to understand what she's writing? Well, of course, I'm looking to test her and to develop her writing ability. So therefore, whether she writes it or whether she types it, it makes little difference. As we'll see later on, when we look at some tasks, you'll get kids who say, sir, miss, do you know what? I can do this a different way. I found a wonderful tool online. Can I go and use that instead of doing it in Word or PowerPoint? In other words, be flexible. And that will motivate your kids, but also, of course, it will provide for differentiation. And we're all looking for that wonderful word. How do we differentiate in the classroom? And the key is through being flexible, in my eyes. Okay. Any questions there at all?
No, you can move on, Paul.
Right, good. Okay, I shall start to swiftly move on. When it comes to the execution of the task-based learning exercise, remember there are three main roles. You have the learner role, and we'll come back to these elements a little bit later again, but you've got the self-awareness for the learner. In other words, they have to become self-aware, which means they have to become responsible. They also have to be aware of how do they learn. Are they good learning with regards to listening, or would they rather watch, or a combination of both? You want to build in some group participation, because everything's about group work. So when we throw them out into the workplace, we want them to work in groups. We want them to be able to work with different people, of course. So make sure that some of your tasks at least have some a group element to it. As we've already said, you want your tasks to be creative, because you want your students to look at certain tasks and say, okay, everybody does it that way, but are there any different ways of doing it? Or, okay, we've got a problem here. And of course, we all have a problem here, which is delivering lessons online to our students. How do I solve that problem? I can do it this way. Let me critically evaluate whether or not I can do it that way, and then move on. So we're making our kids very much accountable, responsible, but we're also giving them the ability to go out there in the world and deal with anything that's being thrown at them. The teacher role, of course, as we said, you're the planner of the task. That is very much the evaluation. You're preparing your learners for the tasks through form. That is very much, of course, through the grammar and everything that comes up with that. But in essence, when you actually go into that task cycle, you become the coach. So you're no longer standing at the front of the class. You're very much walking around and you're dealing with issues on an individual basis. Your joint roles, of course, become that third part of that task cycle, and that's when you start to evaluate. But the evaluation is for every student specific, and that means it's tailor-made. And that, of course, is a great way to motivate those kids. Right, okay, any questions there at all?
No, Paul, you can go on.
Good. Okay, the last thing I think before we start looking at some tasks is I want to take you into the task-based golden circle. And some of you may have looked at the golden circle before. You've pretty much heard it from Simon Sinek. He very much has become famous for that with regards to TED Talks. So if you want to see a bit more about the golden circle, have a look at TED Talks by Simon Sinek, and he talks about Apple and Dyson Hoovers and everything else. But I actually think it works for us as well. So let's look at that first of all. And he came up with this golden circle and said, a lot of us, of course, start with the what. And of course, many of us as teachers, we will have said, well, this is what we're going to do today in the classroom. But maybe you want to think about flipping it and saying, why are we going to do it? Yeah, because the kids really want to hear why. Because if you start with the grammar exercise, some of you kids will say, oh, what do we have to do that for, sir? Yeah, we've all heard that one. But actually, why don't you start off with the why? Convince them why it is you're going to do it. Give them a reason. That reason can be because I want to improve the imperative. Yeah, your imperative skills. I want you to be able to write a leaflet, and therefore the imperative grammar is important for you. I want you to convince me to go and visit a particular country. So therefore you need to be able to describe things, explain things in my case, the English language, but it could be German, it could be Dutch, it could be anything. In other words, give them a credible reason why you're actually doing something. Why are you teaching that particular element? That then automatically goes on to the how. Well, from my point of view, very many elements, I try and deal with them through task-based learning. Yeah, so I've told them what I am expecting to see, why I'm doing it, but actually the how is through the task. And what comes out of it is, of course, variable from student to student. Some kids might be good at grammar, some kids might be better at speaking skills, some might be better at presentation skills or online skills. But that gives us an opportunity because it is variable. Because what that means is that when I actually sit down in my coaching role and I sit down with John, for example, and I give him feedback and he then reflects on that feedback, I can then say, right, okay, you weren't so good at the imperative. Everything else was great, John, but the imperative wasn't that good. What I can then do is I can tailor that bit of form explanation, in this case, the imperative. And when the next time John does another task-based assignment or challenge, then having given that tailored bit of explanation, his what, the variable output, improves again. So it becomes a continuous cycle. But the key thing there, of course, is that because you're coaching and because you're giving them individual feedback, that tailored form, the reflection, the feedback, the improvement becomes specific, yeah, becomes tailor-made to that student. And that's what makes task-based learning so great. Okay, we've already talked about linking it into 21st century skills. Easy to do, and I'll show you later on through the teacher book how we do that in bloggers, but just about every country in the world, not many left out, sign up to the OECD, and they're asking us very much to deal with the 21st century skills to prepare our kids for the new world out there, whatever it's going to look like. Learning skills, self-awareness, speak for themselves. How do I best learn? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Yeah, how do I behave? Communicating, whether it be in speaking, writing, online, how do I do that? And how do I also work together with other people? Those are all those skills that are seen to be very important. Cultural awareness. Yeah, how do I deal with people from other cultures? Good one to explain from an English teacher's point of view, of course, is that we teach our kids that mostly compared to Dutch and German and French, for example, we don't really have the polite form. It's you in English. And of course, in Dutch, we have the je and the u version, the u being the polite version. Kids then think, oh, well, everything's you. I can say you, but how am I polite to other people? And of course, in English, we can say blah-de, 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 blah, and I can add sir or madam at the end. And that's something very cultural, because if you're aware of that, then of course your communication is so much more effective, so much more better. And finally, and this is a red thread, I think, through the whole presentation today, is that it's all about creative thinking. We want our children, the workers of the future. We want them to be able to think on their feet. If they meet a problem, encounter one, look at it, they want them to solve it, critically evaluate it, and then be creative in how they come up with the answer as well. So those are the things that the OECD has come up with, and these will become more and more important in our teaching of anything, including languages, of course, as well. With regards to bloggers, how do we deal with all of these elements that I've just gone through? Well, of course, you have the student book and the workbook. These two all work towards a task. So they all have the communication skills in there, they have the creativity in there, they have the 21st century skills in there as well. We then also have a teacher book that gives the teachers far more ideas. It links many of those exercises and tasks to the 21st century skills. And on top of that, we give you the USB stick, which gives you the audio and the videos and everything else as well. So that's putting all those elements together. Bloggers addresses all of those items that go towards successful task-based learning. And finally, also, we'll have a very brief look at that. We've got a Bloggers Digital, and that, of course, becomes very important, especially now when we're dealing with our kids online. They're not in the classroom, but we still want feedback on how they are doing. And that we get through Bloggers Digital. Last but not least in this bit of theory for you, and that is the teacher's book. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we've got the infographic there on 21st century skills from the SLO and Kennisnet, because everybody is realizing and recognizing that these 21st century skills are crucial now with regards to preparing our kids for the 21st century. I think we're also seeing that task-based learning is a great concept, a great vehicle for addressing all of these 21st century skills. But as you can see from the infographic, there are 11 segments to that. And it's very complicated when you try and put your tasks or align your tasks to every one of those segments. So what the SLO and Kennisnet have done is they have put those slices, as it were, into 4 main segments. So you've got thinking and dealing with issues. Those are the 3, so critical thinking, being creative and solving problems. You've got getting to know yourself or self-awareness. That is self-regulating in the infographic. We've got dealing with others, in other words, communication. So there we've got how are we with social skills, how are we working together, and how do we communicate with other people. And finally, we've got the digital world around us. In other words, how good are we at knowing what is true, what is not true. How good are we at knowing what are reliable sources online. In other words, how do we deal with all of those online tools that are available to us? Are we able to use them? Are they good to use? And so on and so forth. And what we've done is, with regards to bloggers, we've put those all into the teacher's book for you. So in other words, next to every unit, part of bloggers, we have aligned every exercise, every task with one of those 4 21st century clusters. Right. Okay. Now, this deals, we'll move on to dealing with task-based learning online. And the resources. Yep, fire away.
Just one thing. You still got 20 minutes to terminate the presentation.
Okay.
Just to let you know.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Okay, any questions at all?
No, there are no questions at this point.
Good, then we'll move on. Right, resources online, ladies and gentlemen. The key thing I want to really convey here is that all of us, of course, are dealing with a brand new situation. All of a sudden, we're no longer standing in front of the classroom, a classroom full of kids, books, a presentation screen, digiboard, whatever you may want to call it. All of a sudden, we're at home. And we have to all of a sudden provide all of these lessons and all of these tasks online. The key message I want to give to you is keep it as simple and as straightforward as possible. Before you start looking at all of these wonderful tools and apps and all these wonderful things out there, think about what you've got already. Well, at my school and at many other schools, of course, we've got Office 365, and in there we've got Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint. So why not think about using those? We've got Teams, yeah, presenting your lessons online. We've got OneDrive that allows you to share your lessons online with your kids. It also allows you or provides your children with a resource where they can share all of their work online should they need to work together. Skype, very much similar to Teams, and Forms, that of course is a wonderful way to test your students' knowledge of something online if you want to. Not to leave all the others out, we've got YouTube, of course, we've got Google Search, we've got Google Maps, and we've got Google Drive. All of those are great resources, and I'll come back to those in a minute. But the key element here is that we're going to take some of these tasks which are built to actually deliver them and work on them in the classroom. We're now no longer in the classroom, so we've got to look at alternative ways of delivering those tasks and for our kids to actually complete those tasks. So the main thing is, how do we do that? My key message is, look at what you've got first of all, and then, yeah, delve into the world of online tools and everything else. If you do want to delve into the world of online tools, there are lots and lots out there. You could spend hours, days, weeks looking for all these tools, but I found one great resource for you to go and have a look at, and that's the Reisgids Digitaal Leermateriaal. Have a look at that. In other words, if you look at their website, the Reisgids Leermateriaal, it will say, okay, maar waar vind je goed digitaal leermateriaal? That is what they're all about. They will say, come to us. And when you go to them, they're available in book form, but even better now, of course, they're available online. And if you go and look at their website, you will find many tools, online tools, whether they're free or not free, whether they're available on the web or for your computer. And here are just a small summary of some of the tools that are available through them, or you can click on and then link through to them, should I say. Venngage, for example, is great for putting infographics together. Canvas gives you loads and loads of templates, schablonen in Dutch. And so does, of course, Sparks, the SP logo, if you want to create infographics, posters, brochures. Powtoon, Movely, if you want to put together animated tasks. Quizstat, Mentimeter, if of course you want to ask your quiz questions. Edpuzzle, another good one, if you want to looking at how well your students, for example, have understood a YouTube film. You can attach questions and answers to your YouTube films if you want to. There are many, many more of that. So go and look at Reisgids Digitaal Leermateriaal, and they're all out there. Offer them also to your kids, because that gives them, of course, the freedom to go and look at something else. They become curious, and they will start to learn other tools that are out there, because that's, of course, is what it's all about. Okay, swiftly move on. And that is flipping ideas. And what I've done is I've put up a blogger's task that I want to run through with you, and you'll then see that we hit a problem and how do we deal with this particular problem. Okay, well, there's the first task. It's a task from Unit 7 in Bloggers 1, so Year 1 for VMBO HAVO, as it were. And it's a real task. It's something that they may, of course, encounter in the real world, and it's set up in 4 steps. It says, think about a place you visited, take notes where you went, what you visited, what was it like, write a script, so in other words, writing skills, and present it to your class. So what do you need to anticipate? In other words, what are the building blocks that you need to give your students so that they can actually achieve this task? Well, first of all, you need to put them in touch with the right vocabulary. Well, we'll have a look at how we can do that. Secondly, you need to give them the right grammar. Now, of course, think about a place you visited, take notes about where you went. We're dealing with the past tense. So therefore, you need to have explained, or at least taken them through and put them in the right direction, how to put the past tense together. Because, of course, they've got to present it, you need to deal with speaking skills. How do we speak? How do we pronounce? How do we present? And therefore, the presentation skills come in as well. The resources that you have in front of the classroom, in many cases, are bloggers, of course, and they take you step for step through all of those elements that need to be anticipated. Here is Unit 7, just to give you an idea. There's the glossary. It gives you the glossary through a mind map. It gives you cognates, in other words, which words in English or Dutch are very similar. And it also, at the bottom, as you say, gives you certain native ways of saying things in English, and what does that really mean in Dutch. So you then come to your semantics and pragmatics again. There's the grammar, and there's the pronunciation. But we have a problem, of course, and the problem is step number 4, and that is presenting your guide to the class. How are they going to present it to the class? Because we're all, of course, sitting at home. So let's look at that again. The anticipation remains the same. We've got the vocabulary, we've got the grammar, we've got the speaking skills, we've got the presentation skills. But it's the presentation that is going to be problematic to us. The online resources are as follows. We've got Teams that allows them to present. We've got Outlook that is, of course, allows them to ask you questions and communicate with you as well outside of Teams. We've got OneDrive, which allows you to share and also set up a sharing facility for your kids. And you've got PowerPoint. And the reason of just looking at this point at these resources is that because you are familiar with those resources, you haven't necessarily got the time to go and look at all of these other resources, some of which we've just looked at, and your kids don't necessarily have the time or the inclination or the motivation at this moment to do so, because of course for them it's also very much a different world. Bloggers can deal with that because, of course, we've got Bloggers Digital. We can offer everything online. And once you've done that, they've dealt with the grammar. In this case, it's the past simple. They all know PowerPoint. So what you can ask your kids is to put their presentation together in a PowerPoint show. Once they've done that, you go into your school system or whatever it may be. In my case, it's OneDrive through Office 365. I set up a sharing facility. I set up the folders where they can submit all their work, where they can also go outside of myself and they can share work together. And then, of course, I offer Teams as their presentation platform, and they can share their screen like I'm sharing my screen with you, and they can still deliver the presentation. So although point 4, present your guide to the class, seemed as a bit of a problem because we're no longer in front of the class, if we think about it, actually most of the tools that we work with at school, apart from Teams maybe in this respect, or Skype or Zoom, whatever the case may be, most of the tools are already there for you. And I think you have enough on your plate at the moment to try and go into weird and wonderful apps and tools, and also the kids will be quite happy because they can still deliver the challenge, they can still get on with it, they'll still be motivated because all of the tools they're used to at school, they can still deliver it in the same way. The only difference is here, we're asking them to actually use Teams to present it to you. Okay, secondly, and this is also where you'll motivate your kids, is your kids will ask, okay, but can I do this? Can I do that? In other words, they'll want to start to add to the mini challenge. And you, I think, should promote your kids. In other words, they come to you and say, can I do X, Y, Z? Then say, yes, of course, wonderful. Sometimes when I start off with task-based learning in year 1, I actually try to encourage my kids to go that extra mile. And I say, choose one of the following. So I'll say, okay, we created looking, you've put together a presentation about where you've been. Now, where you've been, create a city tour for it. Put photos and a voiceover on a sightseeing tour. Create an en route tour. Design an infographic for tourists. Create a city tour video. And I won't ask my kids to actually do all 4 of them necessarily, but I'll say pick one that appeals to you. So there is something in there for everybody. The key thing for you, of course, is to make sure that those online resources are available. They can use PowerPoint, they can use Word, they can use Google Maps. We're all used to typing in, going into Google, typing in a place, and up it comes on a map for us. But if some of the kids come to you and say, oh, we've looked at the reiskits with all those leermaterialen, can we have a look at Canva, or can we look at Sparks, whatever the case may be, then absolutely encourage your kids to go and explore, be curious. The key thing for you, of course, is that, again, you provide the sharing facility if they're working together, or the submission facility to hand in their homework or their task through your OneDrive. If some of the kids come to you and say, okay, how do I put together a city tour? Well, as you can see here, you can offer them PowerPoint as one option, but actually there is a great app available called Tour to Do, and if you look at that, that allows you to put tour guides together, information leaflets, speaking tours, video tours, no matter what it may be. But the options are there to go that extra mile. Infographics. Of course, you've got Venngage, that's the little symbol in the top right-hand corner, and you can channel your students to go and explore Venngage and how that allows them to create a great infographic. If they're not that comfortable with them, they can stick with PowerPoint, and if they want to draw it, let them draw it. There is no problem there. Give them the flexibility to excel in whichever area they wish to. But of course, the key thing to look out for there is if a student comes up and draws all the time, or does only works in PowerPoint all the time, then at some point you want to start pushing them and getting them to explore other ways of doing it. And that, of course, is part and parcel of the student learning themselves and being flexible as well. By the way, an infographic is a great way of doing a multi-disciplined task-based learning exercise. In Dutch, we would call that vakoverstijgend. So why not get together with your maths teacher and say, right, okay, if you tackle the part about percentages and numbers and everything else, I'll do the English language side of things, and together we can put together an infographic example, an infographic task. Right, any questions there at all?
Yes, Paul, we've got several questions.
Shoot.
So the first question is from Evelyn Martin. She asked, which level is bloggers for?
Bloggers is MAVO, HAVO, and years 1 to 4, obviously. Yeah, and 5 for HAVO.
Okay, and then I got an anonymous question, and the question is it possible for kids to choose different tasks, catering to their personal preference?
Yes, you can do that. Initially, of course, you need to get your students used to task-based learning. You need to get them used to the freedom of a task. You'll find that when you start, and it's really quite strange, for example, with a brochure, and they'll come to you and they'll say, well, what do I put on the front of the brochure? And I'll say, do anything you like. And of course, I'm straight away throwing it back at them and giving them the freedom to do anything they like. And I certainly found in the early stages that they find it difficult to deal with that freedom because they're not used to having that freedom. But certainly the more and more you start giving them task-based learning experiences, the more and more you put in the going the extra mile, and the more and more you say, well, actually, if you've got a better idea, you come to me as well, then absolutely get them to choose. What I also do, a great tip, is every 2 or 3 months, I sit down with my kids and I say, right, okay, give me a number of subjects. What subjects are you interested in? And I will build a task around that. Inevitably, you're going to get football, you're going to get fashion, you're going to get fireworks, you're going to get roller coasters. They generally always come up with the same subject matters. But the key thing about bloggers is that if you are new to task-based learning, new to thinking about, okay, how do I put one together? What subjects do I choose? Or maybe you haven't got the time at the moment to put it all together, because it does take a bit of time to put these tasks together, then bloggers is a great starting point. But actually, as the question states, can you get them, can they ask what tasks to do? Absolutely, that's entirely down to you. Depends how flexible you can be with regards to time and everything and so on. But yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that for the answer. I got 2 more questions.
Okay.
The first one of Bessiana, she asked if bloggers is also about how to write a blog.
Yes, indeed. You'll find as you go through the not only the teacher book, the workbook, and also the student book. So let me put that in the right context. You go from the student book, where kids will practice how to, for example, write a blog, but they'll also see other blogs that are put in front of them. So they'll experience blogs, they'll go through the right steps, how to write a blog, and then essentially those elements are all put together, and then you have a task or a challenge, how to write your own blog. So absolutely, it's all there in a stepping stone format. We then also provide the teacher book, and the teacher book gives you another set of ideas on how to get your kids going and how to motivate them, and extra motivational exercises working towards that challenge. And as you asked, in this case, writing a vlog or a blog. Yeah, it's all in there for you in a logical sequence.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Then the last question, it's a question of Hilda, and she was asking, what about learning apps? Did you have any information about that as well?
There are lots of learning apps around, and with regards to ones that are already established, and lots of apps that allow you to create your own learning environment. I would say at this stage, go and look at the reisgids, leermateriaal that we've just had a look at. Go and have a look at that, and you'll find lots of information there.
Okay, perfect, Paul. Just one thing. We started a bit later because of some technical problems we had at the start. Just to let you know that we've got some more time, and so feel free to finish the whole presentation.
Okay,
and
thank you.
If there are people who have to leave, just that you know that the whole presentation will be sent afterwards to all the participators.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Great.
You're welcome.
Right, okay. Now, let me just go back one slide. So where we've come from the standard mini challenge here in the top left-hand corner, where we had a problem in step number 4, and how do we present it to the class? We solve that by dealing with what we've already got, what we know, what your students already know, and that is, of course, using PowerPoint or Word, providing it through OneDrive, and then presenting it through Teams. We then looked at going the extra mile, and the more and more you go the extra mile, and the more and more you get into task-based learning, you'll get some of the students come up with their own ideas. And this is how we came up with Little Paul. You remember my co-host? And I just wanted to show you how we got there. One of my students came to me and he said, "Have you seen this ad, sir?" And of course, it's the Bell Simple ad on the Dutch TV. And what it does, quite simply, it creates, it has a set of finger puppets, in this case, Sherlock Holmes, of course, and it creates a story based in London. And some of the kids said, "Well, can we do that as a project?" And me being me, and I'm sure you will do so as well in the future, said, "Yes, what a great idea. Let's see how we can actually put that all together." Now, when you say to your kids, "Let's see how we can put that all together," what you're actually doing is you're throwing it back into their lap. You're saying to them, you want to do a project or a task-based learning experience, whatever you want to call it. You came up with the idea. Now you go and show us how we put it all together. That's where the idea simply came from. And what we ended up with was putting together a video, something similar to the finger puppets. But we didn't do the finger puppet idea because another student came up with, how about we create mini versions of ourselves? And that's where the Little Paul came from. And they created a little mini version of themselves. They took a photograph of themselves. They stuck it on a little puppet type figure. I've put mine on a man in a suit. Somebody else put it on. Somebody created a Superman and put their head onto Superman. And they then put it into PowerPoint, and they then created a video. And what I just want to run by you is what that actually went into. So it started life as an idea from one of my students, and this is what it turned into as a whole task-based experience.
Help! Somebody get me out of here. I need to tell you something important. Oh, thank you. It's really dark in here.
But where are you then?
Hi, I'm over here. My name's Paul.
Okay, and there's more, of course, but I just wanted to take you to that point, and just to say that once again, as a previous person, I forget the gentleman's name, asked, well, can they also choose their own task-based learning experience? And absolutely, this is just a good example. I created this particular one, but most kids took a London landmark and they put that into PowerPoint. They put their puppet into it. They created a voiceover and they put it into a presentation. They uploaded it into YouTube. I created a private YouTube channel for my class, and we had a great time doing so. But of course, what did they learn from it? They learned to be creative. They learned to write their script. we dealt with speaking skills, we dealt with presentation skills. We also went and took a look at how do we actually put it into YouTube? How do we do all of that? So it was, in fact, a great experience. But it's just to show you how one thing can lead to another thing, can lead to another thing. And this was very much student driven, very much through motivation and ambition on the side of the student. Right, okay. One other quick thing I'd like to run you through, because I've got a few more minutes. And this was a task-based learning experience which I put together myself for my students. Call it Glorious Chocolate. So it's all about chocolate. And of course, it's an instant hit with the kids. And there is the actual information I give to my kids. I say to them, okay, give me a short history of chocolate, name and describe a dish or a pudding yourself, give me a list of ingredients, show me how to create the dish, include step-by-step photos with detailed explanations, and then present it to the class. Well, of course, that is just when this whole corona crisis hit, and therefore we weren't able to present it to the class anymore. But what we're now doing is they're presenting it online through Teams, for example. But the anticipation for this, from my point of view, was the grammar. So they were talking about history, which of course is the past simple. They're having to write instructions, which of course is the imperative. They had to go and look up the relevant vocabulary for it themselves. They had to practice their speaking skills because they have to present it. They also had some listening skills. What I actually did was I gave them a small presentation, which I put together in PowerPoint. Normally I put it in front of the class. This time I uploaded it to YouTube, and I used the Edpuzzle tool. Some of you may have heard of that. If not, go and have a look at it. It's called Edpuzzle. And I attached questions to my presentation to make sure they understood it. And I asked them also then to reflect some of that in their presentation. They then presented it. Here are the online resources that I'm making available for them. Still Bloggers Digital, of course, so that they've got the vocab and the grammar and all the building blocks. I told them to go and look at the Naiswitz Digital to put something else in. Also Edpuzzle from my point of view, and PowerPoint. And so these are some of the images that allow me to deal with cocoa, that allow me to deal with where on that world map is cocoa grown, from where to where does it move, who eats or which countries eats the most chocolate, and so on and so forth. So it was cultural as well. And here was the step-by-step guide that I was asking my students to create. So again, quite an authentic task, having to do something that quite a few people have to do, not only with cooking, but instructions of any kind. They have to deliver it in clear, concise language, which of course is, in this case, imperative grammar, and so on and so forth. And then we put it online. So that's just to give you an example of, I started with something task-based. The problem that we now all have to deal with hit. What do I do with it? How do I flip it? Well, I put it online and I share it with the tools I normally use anyway. The additional tool there was, of course, to use Teams. Very quickly, because I know we're almost towards the end now, with a few minutes remaining, a lot of people will say, great, task-based learning. I can see the benefits. I can see how it motivates kids, but how do you actually evaluate what they've done? Well, in Bloggers, again, in the teacher book, what you will find for every single task, or every challenge as they call it, you will find an evaluation grid. I won't spend too much time on this because you can look back at it as we upload the presentation online for you. But as you can see at the bottom, the task completion goes from no pictures are used, the text isn't very clear, all the way here to the bottom right-hand corner. An effort has been made to personalize the two-page yearbook, contributing to its overall effect. We've also, just for the time being, put the standard marking in there, very much the Dutch marking, as we'd say, 0 to 5.5, an onvoldoende, and it becomes a voldoende, or adequate from 6, and then into 8+. It's strange, but you'll find, if you haven't dealt with formative evaluation before and task-based learning, your kids will find it difficult if you don't necessarily give them a mark for their work. But once you start to deal with the formative evaluation, and just to remind you, formative information where you deal with feedback, you get your students to reflect, you identify the tailored form, the tailor-made explanation that they require so that they can improve and be more successful again on the next task-based learning experience. But as I said, the evaluation grids are there in Bloggers for you. Checklist, I'll just run through that with you. We've done that already.
Paul, can I just ask some questions before you go further?
Sorry, yeah, fire away, sorry. I'm just aware of time.
I got some questions about for which level Bloggers is.
As I've already said, the level is very much VMBO plus and HAVO.
But it's for A1, A2, B1 and B2, exactly.
Absolutely, yeah,
yes.
Yeah, indeed, confirmed.
And there are some people who do not know what MAVO, HAVO means.
Sure.
So
okay,
could you explain that?
Well, in the Netherlands, we have a system of schools, and depending on your ability, that comes from perhaps a test and how your primary school teachers see you. You are sent to various levels of schools, and they start off with a MAVO, and there are different levels within MAVO, and then you move up to HAVO. MAVO is a 4-year course. You then go on to a different type of education. You then go, if you're HAVO, it's 5 years, and if you're Atheneum or Gymnasium, then it's 6 years, and you can then move into university if you want to. But certainly it's A1, A2, and I would argue probably good enough for B1 and B2 as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And then I got one more question. Is it aimed at teenagers, the book, or is it also suitable for adults?
I would argue it's suitable for adults as well, because the pictures and the feel, you could argue, of the book is more aimed at teenagers. Yeah, it has a light-hearted feel. There's lots of colors, there's some pictures in it, etc., etc. But actually the tasks themselves and the building blocks leading up to the tasks, they are suitable for everyone. Yeah, 0 to 100.
Okay, thank you. Then I got one more question. Can you tell them again what the name is of the infography tool?
Oh yes, it's Venngage. Sorry, one of them is Venngage.
Okay.
But if you go back onto, and again, it's in the presentation, that website, that reisgids leermateriaal, you'll find them all there. The other thing you can do is you can go into Bloggers, you can go into Google, and if you just type in the top 10 infographic tools, they'll all come up and they'll tell you whether it's free or free up to a certain point and then becomes paid, where there are special deals for education. But yes, have a look at the presentation again later on and you'll find that particular link in there.
Okay, thank you. Just some extra information for the people who are listening right now. If you would like to have a free sample of the book, please go to our website, and also at the end, we will send you an email in which you can request a sample of the book. So don't worry. At the end, I will tell you a bit more information about that as well. That's it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I know we're nearing the end, so I've put together here a checklist for you with regards to what are you looking for when you're putting together a task-based learning exercise. Of course, Bloggers has already done it all for you, but you can expand on those as well, or you can create your own. And here is a list of the checklist, what you need to look for. These are the checklist requirements with regards to task-based learning, and here's some more points if you want to delve and link them up to 21st century skills, which of course Bloggers does for you as well. Okay, I know I've rattled through and run through task-based learning, the fundamentals, the basics, what you need to look out for. We've had a look at some task examples. We've also had a quick look at how do you flip them? In other words, how do you put them online? Because of course you're going to meet certain aspects of that task that you can't deliver in front of a classroom, so you need to deal with it online. My overall advice and summary would be, first of all, think about those tools you already use. Microsoft Office, be it Teams, be it Skype, be it Zoom, be it OneDrive, iDrive. Look about what you use already. Certainly from my experience in the last 4 or 5 weeks in delivering online lessons through Teams in my case, kids have very much come to me and said, please just, let's stick with what we already know, because so many new things are being thrown at them by so many teachers that they're saying, whoa, it's a bit overload. So, and of course, we don't want to scare these kids, but you will get a number of kids that will say with the task-based challenge, they'll say, but can I go and use this tool because mum or dad or my brother or sister says that's great? And then of course, yeah, by all means, tell them to go and fly with it. And I normally say, blow my mind, impress me. That is great. That's what I'm looking for. But anyway, as I said, we've rattled through. I've given you a quick overview. I hope it's been useful to everybody. And finally, are there any questions or ideas?
Actually, most of the questions have been asked. So I think I was just watching through. No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Is there something else you want to point out at the end, or?
I think there was a wonderful comment in the chat, and that was, of course, good old Forrest Gump, and life is like a box of chocolates.
Yeah, that's nice.
Isn't it so true? But you know what? Task-based learning is your box of chocolates. Everybody, if your task has been put together very well, and there are lots of elements, and you give freedom, then you give your students the freedom to pick and choose which bits of the task they really want to excel at. So it's like a box of chocolates, absolutely.
Okay, well, then we come to the end. If you still have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I will just give some more information about the book Bloggers, just that you know that Bloggers 1, the textbook and the workbook, is available, and the textbook and workbook of Bloggers 2 is available from June this year. And we've got the teacher's guide available from July this year. And if you would like to have a chapter, just to see a free a chapter, like chapter 3 of the book of Bloggers 1, it is possible to send it to you. And I think we will send it automatically in our mail we will send to you to thank you for your participation of this webinar. Together with the slide of the video and the presentation, and also the chat, so that you just know that you will receive everything of today. Let's see if there have been more questions. Okay, I only see if you also want to see our digital material about Bloggers, just send an email to info@taleland.nl. I'm sorry. And then let me check. No, that's it. These were all the questions, Paul.
Okay. Good. Well, yeah, it remains for me to say thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. En dankjewel aan iedereen. En tot de volgende keer.
Ja. En hetzelfde ook vanuit hier, vanuit Oegstgeest.